There we go. So yeah, this time last year, I was sort of lucky enough to have been given the Graham Williamson Research Award by Socitm for a proposal I put together around looking at cultures of innovation. The principle being that I am of the opinion that government plus more government doesn't necessarily mean innovative government. So if we limit ourselves to only looking at perspectives around us, so looking between ourselves as much as we talk about collaboration, we kind of limit the scope for change. We kind of only ever look at very similar concepts and very similar sets of stuff and try and replicate it. And that doesn't necessarily, when times are tight and things are really difficult, doesn't necessarily give us some of the best outcomes. So I want to talk to you a bit about some of the stuff I've found. It may seem quite a long way from that concept, but I think some of this stuff is at the heart of that, so hopefully you'll bear with me. But before I do that, just thank you for people that have been hardcore enough to stick around, because I know it's a really long week, well, it's this weekend, 2 days. So we'll begin. So I'll start with something from a guy called Astro Teller who works at Google, and if you haven't seen the Moonshot Thinking video that Google produces as part of Google X, go watch it. It's quite inspirational. If you ever need something for a team meeting, just to get people going, play that. It's 3 minutes you won't waste. And he says, if you want cars to run at 50 miles per hour, 50 miles per gallon, that's fine. You can retool your car a bit. But if I tell you it has to run on a gallon of fuel for 500 miles, you have to start over. We've reached a tipping point in our organisations. We're under constraints that we've seen and heard an awful lot about, and we know all too well from personal experience how difficult that can be. But we kind of have to stop at some point and wonder how we got here. What's changed? What's different today that wasn't different, that wasn't the same 10, 20 years ago? We have to reevaluate how we do things. We can't afford to keep delivering incremental change, percentage-based improvement year on year. Organisations need to innovate, respond, and change faster than ever before. Since the dawn of the internet, the sort of pace of change and innovation has increased exponentially. It's been driven by things like a reduction in the cost of technology. It's fairly simple to see when you look at the price of drones. Things like 3D printers are suddenly available for every home, relatively speaking. And then you've got things like, in medical world and criminal world, DNA sequencing, actually finding out what's going on. These things cost millions of pounds. Now they cost very little, under £1,000 to do DNA sequencing. That's this amount of changes within a 7-year period. That's quite staggering. When you combine that with the ever-increasing networks we're producing, we've heard a lot about the Internet of Things and all sorts of different kinds of change, it's effectively never been easier to bring an idea to life. Anyone on the street with an idea and a laptop sitting in a coffee shop can change the world. We see it at scale more than ever. Billion-dollar companies are being created overnight. Now, you take something like Instagram. It's a very simple idea. It's a very tiny, simple idea. It's one app. Within 2 years after launch, it sold for $1 billion. That's not small change. That's fast-paced scale. Airbnb has more listings than any hotel chain in the world. They're 7 years old, and they're a $10 billion company. These companies are designed to operate in the digital age. They are true digital companies. And we're at a state where we've introduced a lot of different techniques, and we've discovered and borrowed and really got hold of a lot of different techniques for delivering services. Challenge shift and digital transformation are not kind of unfamiliar subjects anymore. But the operating model within most organisations for delivering change hasn't really changed for over 100 years now. Processes for doing stuff are still based on this industrial model, this production line approach to change. That means decision making is still very slow. People feel like cogs in a machine. We do something over here and we kind of pass it on to the next person, we chuck it over the wall to the next person, and it just gets handed down the line until something or other comes out the other end. Most organisations are trying to use techniques of the digital age, but their operating model remains stuck in the industrial age. Organisations are struggling because they're using operating models designed for efficiency, not change. Efficiency is great if you have a long-term plan. If you know what you're going to do over a long period of time, you can get into the details of how to do something really, really efficiently. But things are changing so quickly. How can we plan that far ahead? The reality is we kind of can't. Customers are varying their decisions and options and varied demands with ever-expanding options available to them. Software as a service being scaled. I want it in the cloud, I want this, I want that. And who knows what the next thing might be. And whatever happens, it's coming quickly. Suppliers are moving faster than ever. We saw earlier about how new businesses are being created overnight and scaling quickly. We don't know who the suppliers are going to be in a year's time that we're really looking to. Efficiency, unfortunately, locks in roles and processes and practices, and it makes it almost impossible to handle change in this continually evolving world. So the model of efficiency is in direct conflict with the model for change. So if we look at the work that most organisations do, there's kind of this spectrum of stuff. And it ranges from kind of the certain stuff, things like administration, call centres, server upgrades, database backups, that kind of stuff. And then there's the uncertain stuff, the kind of non-routine change about things like implementing new systems or developing and designing new infrastructures. More and more, the routine stuff is being handled by technology. Yet, the kind of more of our work is becoming this more complex, difficult model to deal with. It's the non-routine stuff. Complex stuff at speed means we have to adopt a different model, one that's designed on learning and adapting and responsiveness. Amy Edmondson wrote a book called Teaming, which, if you haven't read it, find a copy, get it, it's absolutely brilliant. And it describes this transition from the old model to the new model. And that is organised to execute, moving to organised to learn. And this means empowering organisations to be quicker at learning, adapting and improving on the fly. Self-organising, open, resilient cultures over hierarchies of control. And after looking at a bunch of companies as part of the research I've done over the last year or so, I want to talk about what we can learn from the three elements of innovative, responsive cultures. And it's broken down in kind of three areas that I want to talk about today. It's purpose, process, and people. I think over the sessions over the past kind of day and a half or so, there's been an awful lot of reference to the people element. There has been many references to the different processes. We've talked about agile all over the place. And then purpose, kind of this connection of user needs. But I think it goes beyond that to understanding what the purpose of our organisations really is. So, what can we learn from different organisations, people like the startups of the world? What is it that's different about their purpose that we have potentially lost sight of? I'd like to see us reconnect with purpose. And that is not a grand gesture and a grand statement about who we should be as organisations. It's about describing what sort of value we bring to the world. If you look at Airbnb, their purpose statement says this: we want to create a world that inspires human connection. They're a travel company who sell rooms in people's houses for money. They own zero real estate, but they have such an empathetic, customer-facing purpose that you immediately want them. You imagine working at a company who has such a bold statement about what they aim to bring to the world. It's not about them, it's about the value they bring to the world they live in. If we look slightly to one side and look at the car industry, you look at what Tesla are doing for electric motoring, and it's quite incredible. But they're also delivering all kinds of levels with power and different ways of doing stuff. Their purpose reads like this: accelerate the advent of sustainable transport by bringing mass market electric cars to the market as soon as possible. They're pushing boundaries forward because they want to make stuff happen. It's not about them being bigger, better and bolder than anyone else. It's about bringing value to the world. The next area is process. So we need to adopt organisational processes that learn and evolve really quickly. So this isn't about delivering services in a different way. It's about how we operate internally in a very, very different way. I went to see Spotify back in September. I spent some time there, and if you're not aware of them, I'm sure plenty of you are. They're a company of 1,200 employees, over 30 different countries. They have an $8.4 billion market value, and they're 7 years old. That's considerable growth and scale all in one go. They are completely agile top to bottom. They're completely self-organising, and new features are given over to the community. So requests are taken from the Spotify community. Any of us in this room can go on to community.spotify.com and submit an idea to Spotify and say, hey, I think this is cool, let's try it. The engineers at Spotify then kind of see those ideas and can pick them up. And they self-organise their own teams completely from the ground up. And depending on what the idea is, they rope in the right skills for the right job. The only consistent thing across the Spotify teams, or they call them squads, is that they have an agile coach. And this isn't about someone who's going to strictly tell them when they're going to have their scrum calls and daily stand-up meetings and all this kind of stuff. It's people there that are designed to help them remove blockages, get people out of the way, just get stuff done. But make sure everyone's informed and flexible and helpful as each other, with a goal of complete and utter focus on purpose. They want to make Spotify a great place, but they equally want to deliver real value to the world. So this is about agile as a behaviour, not a methodology. This is a process that learns all the time. And you can see that it's about community over structure. And one of the last elements I want to talk about is people. So most of these organisations are founded on one very, very key principle. And people is something we talked about a lot today, and a bit yesterday as well, is trusting and empowering people means getting more value from them, and actually a lot of savings. If you want to do this kind of agility at scale in this fast-moving world, you have to trust at scale. If you look at someone like Valve, now Valve make software and hardware for the gaming industry, and again, they're one of the biggest companies in their industry themselves. They have basically no management, and they use a completely self-organising adaptive model as well. And they published it all. So if you do nothing else after this talk, please visit that link. Go and have a look at their employee handbook. You wouldn't believe what is in there. It describes everything about the culture, how it operates, what it's about, what it means to work at Valve. And believe it or not, on day one of starting at Valve, your job description reads like this. It's 2 bullet points. It says, find something to do, and find other smart people like you to work here. Go. That's it. That's a kind of crazy, risky world to live in. But why does it work? Well, Valve actually look at a very different type of employee. They're trying to employ what they refer to as T-shaped employees. These are broad generalists, but they have deep expertise in single areas. So what they're bringing to the table is this general understanding of their entire industry, but a really deep focus in what they're on about. This brings leadership and structure and a self-organising culture that is a lot more responsive than any hierarchy could be. The final company I want to talk about is Blundell. Some of you may have seen quite a bit coming out of Dave Briggs at Durham Worthy, who's like raving about them at the moment. Is Paul Brewer? Is Paul Brewer in it? No. So Blundell do caring community, a little bit social care-esque, so it's quite a nice tie-in. Blundell run, again, a very self-organising model. Their nurses lead assessments with people, planning patient care and commitment with each other. And they're in self-managing teams of 12, both nurses and other healthcare professionals clubbed together, and they have varied skills depending on their clients' needs. So they provide coordinated care for specific areas of about 40 to 60 patients at a time. And they moved to this model because of the same sort of financial constraints we're facing. So why do they work and what have they achieved? Well, by defining their clear purpose and limiting their managerial structure, Blundell nurses actually have greater autonomy to organise their own client visits and day-to-day nursing activities. They've massively reduced administrative costs as a result, because they're taking ownership and they're empowered to deliver. They know what needs to be done, so get out of the way. They've seen a 40% reduction in client costs when compared to other home care organisations. And that equates to a potential national savings of about £1.9 billion pounds a year. And as an aside, they have the highest customer satisfaction rate in the country. And below average sick rates. So if history teaches us anything, it's that we don't get things right the first time. And with the pace of change increasing every day, it's more important than ever that we design our organisations to be far more resilient and responsive. We're seeing signs of this already. I don't know if anyone's heard, but an actor during Whirling, that's why I mentioned Paul and Dave. Dave pulled in their organisation development team into their design and digital team because they understand that their operating model around changing the way they deliver services and the way they operate internally is not just about the output. It's about the impact it makes long term on not just the user, the end user in the public domain, but the organisation themselves. So, what am I trying to say? Life's too short for us to not do something that matters. And we can do this ourselves. Everyone in this room has the power to change their organisation in some way. Help connect people back with the purpose, the reason they're there. Change your organisation processes just a little bit to learn that each time you do something has to be valuable. And empower people. We're employing good people with good reason, so let them get on with it in the ways they best know how. The organisations succeeding in the 21st century have the capability for purposeful innovation through self-organisation, and that means creating more adaptive and responsive organisations. Thank you.
Thanks for giving us this inspiration stories. Could I ask, because the examples you gave, most of them are American stories and one for Europe, and according to the name. And is there something the government could do to encourage the small business in this country to grow?
I think there's a lot of examples out there already in this country. As part of the work I did, I went to visit Snook up in Scotland, who, if anyone gets a chance to look at their work as well, they're a fantastic service design organisation up in Glasgow. They're just, interesting point with them, they've just launched an office in London, but it's not the normal kind of office. So there's lots of initiatives going on. Certainly with Snook, they did a bit of a deal with Origin Housing, who manage housing stock in London. And one of the most deprived areas there, behind Euston Station. And Snook have recently taken up office in one of the flats that they couldn't fit. So Origin Housing couldn't afford to do up one of the flats there, and they struck a deal with Snook to say, well, you can take this office for much lower rates, and as long as you contribute to the community. So Snook have now set up camp in that house, in that flat, in an area of London, and they're sort of co-designing and understanding what's going on in the area. So I think there's a lot already going on to kind of spur people on and connecting these up. The networks are a lot tighter knit. So once you start to see people like FutureGo, Don yesterday, these companies are coming through and they're there to help. They have experience and they know what's going on, and they just approach it in a very different way.
Could I ask a second question? This today and yesterday, we heard a lot of stories how the government platform could provide better service to the citizen. And is there would anybody look at the other way around, like how you push the information out, then how you get the information back and best use it? This is
I think it's about that kind of reconnecting people. If you reconnect people with their purpose, they become a lot more aware of their surroundings. So they start to absorb that information a lot more easily. So they start to listen a lot more, so connecting organisations up in that way. So absorbing those stories from contact centres and face-to-face appointments, as much as we're trying to shift away from those, there's really valuable information out there about understanding where people are coming from and what their experiences are.